UFC 297, Sean Strickland versus Dricus Du Plessis. Welcome to another UFC prediction and analysis video presented by yours truly here at Boxing MMA Picks. He goes by Zan, I go by Harris, as usual, fight-by-fight breakdowns and analysis from that betting perspective. So we want to let you know which fights are worth the value, which fights to avoid, which underdog has the best shot at winning, and some parlay action toward the end of the video as well. Make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video. We would definitely appreciate that. Make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video as well as subscribe to the channel at Boxing MMA Picks. And most importantly, we're going to want to hear from you in the comments when it's all said and done. Now, for this UFC 297 pay-per-view event, it is taking place at the Scotiabank Arena in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Expect to see a lot of Canadians on this card. We have 12 fights overall. 7 of them are going to be on our prelims, and 5 of them are going to be on our main card. Let's get started with fight number 1 of our prelims, and we are looking at the Canadian Malcolm Gordon taking on Jimmy Flick. Malcolm Gordon's on a 2-fight losing streak. He lost to Jake Hadley back in March. Jimmy Flick also on a 2-fight losing streak, losing to Alessandro Costa, back in June. Now, this is an interesting fight in that, it's not really the highest level fight. So that's going to tell you what you can expect from a betting perspective. Can't really be too confident in either direction. I do think Malcolm Gordon should be the better striker comparatively between these two. Gordon fights at a high pace that can definitely work well for him, and especially that both of these guys are not durable. We look at their records there. Both of them have 7 losses. But what's interesting to note, 5 of those losses for Gordon via KO, TKO, 6 of those losses for Jimmy Flick via KO, TKO. I think the lack of chin, the lack of durability on both sides actually favors Malcolm Gordon in this one because, again, I see him as the more dangerous striker between the two. Now, Jimmy Flick is more committed to the takedowns. He should use it a lot in this fight, but Gordon can land takedowns as well, right? Neither guy has great takedown defense, so I do think both guys can be effective in that area, or at least, score points in that area. But overall, I do think Malcolm Gordon gets it done. It's a common theme for these non-US based pay-per-view events to feature a lot of fighters in that home country. As I mentioned, going to see a lot of Canadians on this card. And the UFC typically gives them winnable matchups. So a lot of Canadians. I think the audience is going to play a factor here. I think Malcolm Gordon is the perfect kind of fighter to get it started for this pay-per-view event. An early Gordon finish wouldn't surprise me. So, not that he's necessarily better everywhere, or not that I can necessarily be too confident, but I do feel that Malcolm Gordon is the more dangerous fighter. So Malcolm Gordon is going to be my pick.
Yeah, I like the can you hear me?
Yep, yep.
Yeah, I like the Malcolm Gordon side as well. Um what I look at in this fight, Flick's last 2 fights, he came back out of retirement. His last 2 fights against Costa, Johnson, they were tough fights, but he looked like he didn't belong in these fights. And against Malcolm Gordon, who is a fighter who is not as dangerous as those 2 guys, is going to be the better guy. He's going to be the better striker in this fight. Is going to be the physically bigger guy in this fight. And I think in a fight like this, he has a solid chance to kind of dictate the striking area as long as he doesn't play around with the grappling. I think this is a fight that he should be able to win easily. But Malcolm is the type of guy that where he likes to play around with grappling. Flick is a opportunistic grappler to kind of jump on a choke. But aside from anything like that, Malcolm looks like he's here to stay. Flick in his last 2 fights looks like he's not there no more. He's not the same guy. So I'm going to go with Malcolm Gordon fighting at home, getting the win in the first fight.
Fight number 2 of our prelims, Jasmine Jasudavicius versus Priscila Cachoeira. Now for Jasmine Jasudavicius, she had a unanimous decision loss to Tracy Cortez. That was back in September. Priscila Cachoeira lost to Miranda Maverick back in July. Going back to Jasmine Jasudavicius for a second, that Tracy Cortez fight, it really put into perspective, at least for me, how solid of a fighter Jasmine is. She's tough, she's durable, she's effective with her takedowns. I know she didn't get the win, but she did show me a lot of good things in that fight. Good takedown defense as well, good pressing style of striking. Um, we know Cachoeira is dangerous. Cachoeira definitely has that puncher's chance in any fight that she's in. And that's where her value is going to be as an underdog. We see her as a sizable underdog here at plus 300. But ultimately, I don't think that's something that you would want to bet on. Jasudavicius should be better virtually everywhere in this fight. You know, she has the better ground game. Cachoeira definitely a liability on the ground. Cachoeira just 65% takedown defense as well. And despite how dangerous Cachoeira can be in terms of her striking, in terms of her puncher's chance, I do think that Jasudavicius should be the better overall striker. I can see that jab being effective all night. I can see her combinations being effective all night. So Jasmine Jasudavicius, she should get it done fairly easy outside of a touch of death power punch from Priscila Cachoeira. That threat may stop me from betting on it, but from a prediction perspective, I do feel pretty confident picking Jasmine Jasudavicius on this one.
Yeah, in this fight, I think Canada's gonna go 2-0 to start the card. I think Jasmine is a bad matchup for Priscila Cachoeira. Priscila, heavy hands, awkward striking, but she has heavy hands for that female division. But Jasmine has that grappling, and Priscila loses the grapplers, and Jasmine's gonna have the game plan. She's gonna look to win this fight at home. I'm more confident in this fight than I was in the first fight. The first fight, I'm not confident at all. I think the first fight can go either way, but this fight, I feel Jasmine has that big advantage that she's going to exploit. So I'm going to go Jasmine to win this fight here with that wrestling.
Fight number 3, Yohan Lainesse versus Sam Patterson. This is the end of the early prelims. Yohan Lainesse lost to Malott back in February, and Sam Patterson lost his debut to Yanel Ashmouz that back in March. Now Patterson was knocked out early in round 1, actually in both of his losses. We see his record there at 10-2. And immediately I'm looking at that as a red flag. I'm looking at that as a potential factor in this fight. Now, Yohan Lainesse, he didn't look impressive in his last fight at all, and that actually makes this one harder to predict. Both of these guys do prefer to strike, though they are both capable on the ground. Lainesse should be the aggressor, the sort of more dangerous striker between these two. Whereas Patterson, you can expect him. He's the taller fighter. He has a 2-inch reach advantage, 2-inch height advantage. You can expect him to be that longer striker who's going to fight from range, who's possibly going to have better and cleaner movement than Yohan Lainesse. Lainesse will have the much better wrestling in this fight, though, and I think that can be a key factor to him winning. I can see Lainesse pushing the pressure, closing distance, landing takedowns, really just trying to make it a rough fight for Sam Patterson. So I think Lainesse wins based on those points mentioned above, based on sort of being the dog amongst these two, so to speak, having more of that dog in him is what I mean, not being the underdog because he is the favorite in this one. And I mean, again, I'm looking at another home country fighter. So even if it is close, it should lean in favor of the home country fighter, Yohan Lainesse. So wouldn't be confident with this one from a betting perspective, not overly confident from a prediction perspective either, but I am going to be picking Yohan Lainesse to get it done here.
Yeah, Lainesse, man, he looks he's dangerous, and on the Contender Series, he was able to showcase that power, and even in fights that he's had in the UFC, he has showcased the fight that power that I'm talking about, especially in that fight versus was Gabe Green dropped him, all right, and he's a dangerous guy, and he's gonna be fighting at home, fighting a guy who doesn't have the best defense. In Sam Patterson keeps his head up. So you think Lainesse at some point is going to connect, and it's going to be lights out for Patterson. So again, yeah, Lainesse rightfully should be the favorite in this fight. I think she is the more dangerous guy. I'm leaning towards an upset. I'm going to go with Sam Patterson. Again, he got knocked out brutally in his last fight. He had his head hanging out there. But I think in this fight, I think Lainesse has cardio issues, and I think if Patterson kind of gets the fight to the second round, second round and a half, I think at that point the fight's going to drastically change. Patterson as well is the type of guy, if he's able to get control, especially due to the opponent's cardio. He's going to look for a finish. Again, I'm not impressed with Patterson. I don't think he's a great fighter. I'm just not feeling Lainesse's cardio, his strategies. He's not the best striker, but he does have that power. And I feel if he doesn't get that finish in that first round, I think he's gonna be looking for a way out. I think he's gonna be gassing. And I think at that point, Patterson, as bad as he is, he has decent cardio. And I think he's gonna be still in the match at that point. So I'm gonna go with the upset. I'm gonna go with Patterson surviving the early rounds with Lainesse and getting him out of there in the second, third round. But again, yeah, this is an underdog pick. I'm not confident, but I'm just not impressed with Lainesse, his cardio, and I think that's something Patterson can exploit.
Fight number 4 of our prelims, Gillian Robertson taking on Polyana Viana, women's strawweight fight here. Gillian Robertson lost to Tabitha Ricci back in June. Polyana Viana also lost her last fight. That was to Jasmine Lucindo. That was back in August. Now, the key stat for this fight will be Polyana Viana's takedown defense. And unfortunately for her, it's sitting at just 43%. We know that Gillian Robertson is going to be kind of a ground first type of fighter. She's going to have a big advantage on the ground in this fight. She lands nearly 2.5 takedowns per fight. Really, what I can see for this fight, I can see Robertson landing takedowns pretty much all fight. And I think that's going to put her in a favorable position to get it done. I think that's a big component why we see her at a minus 295 favorite here. In addition to that home crowd, I think this is one of those fights again, home crowd set up for her to win. Now, Viana, interestingly, I mean, not interestingly, but something to keep in mind is that Viana may be the better striker. Still remember, Robertson is not a great striker by any means. It's only recently that she is starting to look serviceable. She's making improvements to her striking. But Viana, more technical as a striker, and she can be effective, especially with that 4-inch reach advantage that she's going to have in this one. And especially that Robertson is still a little bit hittable in terms of her striking. Polyana Viana is also a good grappler, so not like she's going to be at a complete disadvantage if this fight goes to the ground. She can also land takedowns in her own right, though it's not a super active part of her game. But Gillian Robertson has just 43% takedown defense herself. So Viana definitely has some value as the underdog, but I'm going to go with Gillian Robertson here because, again, I think the biggest advantage for her, besides the takedown advantage, besides the improved striking, I think the biggest advantage for her is her cardio advantage in this one. Polyana Viana definitely slows down. We know Gillian Robertson keeps that pressure on, keeps that chain wrestling going. So even if it's not too effective in that first round, I can see Robertson sort of cruising her way to victory in that second round, in that third round. So I can see Robertson winning unanimously. I wouldn't be overly confident because it is still women's MMA. Polyana Viana still has some values to her as an underdog, but I do believe that Gillian Robertson should get the job done here.
Yeah, fun fact in this fight is Polyana Viana has never won a decision. And yeah, she hasn't won a decision in the UFC. And fighting a girl like Gillian Robertson, I was leaning towards an upset, Polyana Viana. I'm not gonna lie here, so I was leaning towards an upset. I felt that Viana has a much more dangerous, more effective striking style. And then I was watching more fights, and I was seeing again like the cardio that you mentioned. She's fading as the fight goes on. She's not that same fighter as she is in the first 2-3 minutes, as she is in that second round. And Gillian Robertson is the fighter that gets finishes in the second round. Is a fighter that's able to go 3 rounds, has that cardio. She's going to be looking for that takedown. And once she gets the takedown, she has really, really good top control. And I don't see Viana getting out of that. And as the fight goes on, cardio, I see draining. So unless Viana gets something done in the first 2 minutes, history says it's not going to go her way. And I like Gillian Robertson here in this fight because I know that she can go that full 15 minutes. And I think that grappling, they both have good jiu-jitsu. They both are black belts, I'm sure. Or Gillian, I'm not sure, but they both are high-level jiu-jitsu players. But one thing about Gillian's jiu-jitsu is she's a lot more aggressive than Viana. and that's going to allow her to kind of dictate a lot of the positioning and the grappling. So I'm going to go with Gillian Robertson, better cardio, using that grappling, getting the takedowns, getting the win here.
Fight number 5 of our prelims. Let's talk Serhiy Sidey versus Ramon Taveras. Now, this is actually their second time fighting. Sidey is making his debut in the UFC, coming off of a win against Ramon Taveras back in September on Dana White Contender Series. Ramon Taveras also making his debut. Mentioned he lost to Sidey on Dana White Contender Series in September, but he did fight on Dana White Contender Series the following month and won. Now, their first fight ended up with Sidey knocking Taveras out halfway through that first round. And this is one of those rematches for me where that first fight is a decent indicator in predicting a rematch. Now, it's just a few months ago, right? Now, the reason why they're even having a rematch is because that fight was probably stopped a bit prematurely by the ref, but Sidey did legitimately knock him down, right? Taveras, either way, better striker, I would say, on paper. I do think he's more dangerous. I do think Taveras is probably the more pure striker between these two. He has good activity, but I don't really think there's too much separating them. I think they're both capable. I think they both can be effective, just like we saw in that last fight that they had. But Sidey to me has the advantage of that ground game, and that's going to make me lean on Serhiy Sidey on this one. Taveras, he's going to be looking for revenge based on how he looked in his last fight the following month after that loss. He can definitely get it, but I think, Sidey has beat him before, and Sidey can do it again by minimizing that gap in the striking department like we saw in the first fight, yet again, if necessary, offering a much more effective ground game compared to what Taveras can offer. So I think Serhiy Sidey gets it done. I think he wins the second fight. I think there was a reason why he won that first fight, and he shows it in the rematch. So I'm going Serhiy Sidey on this one. Now, I will say from a betting perspective, stay away from this. The pay-per-view event, it's both of their debuts. It's a rematch. A lot of red flags from that betting perspective, but from a prediction perspective, I'm expecting Serhiy Sidey to get it done again versus Ramon Taveras.
Okay. I feel this is going to be a striking match. I feel this is going to be a striking fight. And both guys, good strikers. Sidey has those kicks, and he's going to be the bigger guy. Physically, he should have the reach advantage in this fight. And again, those kicks are a problem. The teep kicks, the high kicks, the low kicks. Very good in with the kicks. But I like Ramon here. He's a bit more. He has more of a UFC style to me, especially with the boxing, the hands. He mixes it up really well. He's really fast. There's multiple fighters that I can compare him to, his style. And I just feel like in this fight, he's gonna be able to kind of avoid that power that he felt in the first fight. Because in that first fight, he was actually winning the fight on the Contender Series. He was actually doing really well, and he got caught, and the referee literally stopped the fight because he dropped, but he wasn't out, and it was immediately Dana White thought this is a terrible stoppage, and this is why they're fighting again. So I'm gonna go with Taveras here because I think I think the speed and the striking. I think it's gonna be a striking fight. The hands on the Taveras side, the speed, the in and out movement. I think it's gonna frustrate Sidey in this fight. I think it's gonna frustrate him, and I think Taveras can actually put him out. He's gonna come in here motivated. So I'm gonna go Ramon Taveras here, using that speed to get the win.
All right, fight number 6 of our prelims, Charles Jourdain versus Sean Woodson. Jourdain 2-fight winning streak. He beat Ricardo Ramos back in September. Woodson beat Dennis Bazooka back in August. Woodson, we know, of course, super tall, super long for the division as a striker. He's going to have a 5-inch height advantage in this one, another 9 inches in reach, which is very significant for this fight. But I feel I mean, I'll get kind of right to the prediction. I feel pretty confident picking Charles Jourdain for this fight. Guys that beat Sean Woodson are guys that have more toughness than him, guys that put the pressure on him, guys that are willing to engage with him while, potentially even looking for those clinch and those takedown opportunities. Now we know Sean Woodson is hard to take down, 83% takedown defense, definitely good at keeping the fight on the feet. Jourdain doesn't really land takedowns either. So I do think that this is a striking match. I do think that Sean Woodson has some value because he's a good striker. May even be the better striker technically than Charles Jourdain. But, to me, the way I look at it, Charles Jourdain, very solid striker himself. More importantly, I think he's going to be putting that pressure on Sean Woodson, going to be putting that pace on Sean Woodson, going to be closing distance on Sean Woodson. Both guys I can see having their moments, but the home crowd for Jourdain, I think it's going to be a big advantage. I think it's going to propel him to winning those rounds, to having the bigger moments, to showing bigger effort, to showing better octagon control. Kind of all of the X factors that go into winning a round is what I see Charles Jourdain doing against Sean Woodson virtually for all 3 rounds, if not potentially getting a finish. So I really like Charles Jourdain in this spot. I think he's talented enough to keep up with the striking that Woodson has. And I think, again, just being that aggressor, he's going to find a way to win the rounds and kind of win a unanimous one from here. So I like Charles Jourdain to get it done.
Yeah, this is a fight that I'm with you on. I like Charles Jourdain as well because Woodson's gonna come in with a boxing approach. He's been grappling a bit, but he's not gonna get the takedowns here. His grappling's not there, but he's gonna come in with that boxing approach, the jab, the 1-2s, and Jourdain's gonna come with that kickboxing. And I think he needs to be going shooting for some leg kicks against a boxer like Woodson, taking those legs out would make it a lot easier as far as the striking goes as the fight goes on. I just like Jourdain here, just his relentlessness, his aggression. He has multiple tools in the striking, not just the hands. He mixes up the kicks well, and I think he's gonna be the stronger guy in this fight to kind of dictate where the fight goes if they get into clinches. So I'm gonna go with Charles Jourdain here, get the win in Canada. I think this is a fight that he could win here against a pretty basic, effective but basic striker with the 1-2s, the jabs. I think Jourdain can mix that up and get the win in this spot.
All right, fight number 7, final fight of our prelims. We're looking at Brad Katona versus Garrett Armfield. Katona is on a 7-fight win streak now. Those include, of course, those Ultimate Fighter wins, which are technically exhibition fights. Nonetheless, he beat Cody Gibson back in August. Garrett Armfield, on the other hand, beat Toshiomi Kazama back in August as well. I think they were on the same card, if I'm not mistaken. And again, I'll go right into the prediction on this one. I'm actually going to go with the underdog, Garrett Armfield here. Seeing the value on him at plus 175. Really, it's about kind of a value play here, more so than necessarily thinking about Armfield as the better fighter. I do think that they're giving Brad Katona a winnable fight in that Armfield isn't a high-level fighter by any means. But when I really break down the skill set, it's not far-fetched to think that Armfield might actually have the better skill set between these two fighters. I look at Armfield as having the more technically sound striking, the better striking, more committed to staying in front of you, more committed to closing distance. I look at, Armfield, yeah, he was taken down twice in his debut, but that was a short notice fight. That was up a weight class. So I think for this fight, he has sort of good enough takedown defense to stop most of the takedown attempts that Brad Katona should attempt. I also don't really see a Katona bringing a heavy wrestling approach to his fights, despite his ability to land takedowns. I think Katona's striking is okay by MMA standards. I think he prefers the striking, kind of tries to push the action forward. But I don't think he's going to commit to the wrestling enough to kind of take an advantage there. And if nothing else, I'm looking at this as kind of like a 50-50 fight where you can't be too high, can't be too confident in either fighter. Because of that, like I said, not going to ignore the opportunity to find a value play on an underdog. I think Garrett Armfield can get it done as an underdog, so he's going to be my prediction here.
Yeah, definitely. This is a fight where I really do think it's a 50-50. I was going back and forth, and with Armfield, I like his boxing, and he does have wrestling as well. But I really like his boxing, his timing on the striking, and in the striking, I think he's gonna have an advantage in this fight. I think he's having an advantage versus Brad Katona. But as far as the fight goes, I see Armfield looking good in that first round, but as the fight goes on, Katona until until um until something tells me different. He's the type of guy that gets better as the fight goes on. He has that dog in him, and his striking is decent. He has decent wrestling, but his cardio is great, and he's gonna fight he's gonna fight for your money. That's one thing about this guy. I'm gonna go with Brad Katona in this fight. I think the experience is big, and I think that first round, I think Katona has seen strikers like this before. But as the fight goes on, I don't think Armfield has seen a guy that's going to keep going at that high pace in that second, third round, where what I've seen, Armfield slows down a bit. So I'm going to go Brad Katona getting the win here.
All right, let's move on to our main card. We have 5 fights overall on the main card. Fight number 1 is Arnold Allen versus Movsar Evloev. High stakes featherweight fight here. Allen lost to Max Holloway back in April. Movsar Evloev beat Diego Lopez back in May, and he's still undefeated at 17-0. High level fight, of course, high stakes fight, as I mentioned. Few things that I notice when I break it down. I'm looking at Arnold Allen as the more dangerous striker for sure. Bigger puncher, big counter puncher, probably has the higher striking IQ as well amongst these two fighters. It took an elite fighter, or I should say, it took an elite striker like Max Holloway a few rounds to figure out Arnold Allen. So that just shows the level of striking that Allen has. Now Evloev has good good enough striking. He does have good striking in his own right. He can absolutely have his moments. He was caught a few times by a solid striker in Diego Lopez in his last fight, and that's sort of part of making the case for Arnold Allen as a better striker here. Now Evloev, on the other hand, to me, definitively has the better ground game. I think he's the stronger wrestler for sure. He's definitely more committed to his wrestling in his fights. Expect multiple takedown attempts, expect the chain wrestling, expect the good takedown entries. He's landed 22 takedowns in his last 3 fights, as an example. And although Arnold Allen, 76% takedown defense, I don't see him being able to stop Evloev from landing the takedowns in this fight. I think it happens at some point in each round. And again, this is only a 3-round fight. I also don't see Allen attempting takedowns against Evloev. I don't think he's going to want any parts of the ground in this fight. And ultimately, I think that's what's going to be the difference as we get to these higher and higher levels. You really want to look at who's more likely to win the round. I think that Evloev is going to be better equipped for winning rounds. I think the wrestling will allow him to win unanimously in this fight. And I think for Arnold Allen to get it done, he would have to hurt Evloev on the feet, or he would have to show amazing Leon Edwards like takedown defense. And that is very possible from Arnold Allen. But I do think that Evloev gets the better of him, uses the wrestling, and stays undefeated. So Movsar Evloev is going to be my pick.
Yeah, this is a fight I did a thorough breakdown on, and I landed on Evloev. As good as Arnold Allen is with his striking, Evloev has seen this before, and when you look at the grappling, Evloev is gonna have that big advantage as Harris mentioned, but you have to take in as well with the grappling guys like Nick Lentz, guys like Mads Burnell was actually winning that fight with his grappling. These guys were able to get takedowns, and Movsar is a completely different guy that actually mixes in an actual striking game. His striking isn't bad, and he has good cardio. So I'm with Harris on this fight. I think he's going to get the takedowns. I think the takedown is going to dictate the fight. Movlev doesn't just give up on takedowns. He gets like multiple 3, 4, 5, 9 takedowns. I've seen him get in a fight. This guy's going to chain wrestle and get it to the mat, and I think that's where the fight's going to be mostly. So I see Movsar utilizing that wrestling. And I think he gets it done here, unanimous type of decision.
Second fight of our main card, Chris Curtis versus Marc-André Barriault. Middleweight fight here. Chris Curtis, his last fight was a no contest versus Nasruddin Imavov back in June. Marc-André Barriault 2-fight winning streak after he beat Eric Anders back in June as well. Now Barriault, I will say, definitely has value as an underdog here, I think, both of these guys, first of all, prefer to strike. I mean, we see the takedown numbers there pretty non-existent on both sides. I think as a striker, Marc-André Barriault, he has that pressure and that pace and that activity that he implements as a striker that can be effective for him, especially against a fighter in Chris Curtis, who sometimes just doesn't throw enough, sometimes just doesn't have enough activity, sometimes doesn't initiate the offense enough. We know that Chris Curtis can definitely have a frustrating style to bet on, especially as a favorite here. But I mean, ultimately, I do think that Chris Curtis is the much smarter bet for this fight. I think you're really getting good value on him, in fact, for this fight at minus 190 as a favorite. Simply put, I think Chris Curtis is a better fighter. I think he's a higher level fighter. I think he has a higher level of striking. I think he has higher striking IQ and that counterpunching ability that he has. It can put him in favorable situations against Marc-André Barriault's style of striking. So I'll keep it short. I feel pretty comfortable predicting Chris Curtis here. This is one that I may be looking to bet on as well.
Yeah, this is a fight. I don't think Mark's gonna be able to get the takedown. Mark's gonna have to hold him against the cage, dirty box, that type of fight. Mark has good cardio, and in fights that he has, a lot of times he breaks fighters down. Their cardio kind of slows down, and Mark still has his, and then kind of he puts it on as the fight goes on, second, third round. But again, Curtis, a vet in this game, and he's the type of guy that is able to go that 3 rounds. So I don't see I don't see his cardio fading out as the fight goes on, as the guys I'm seeing in the videos when they're fighting Mark that have cardio problems. I think a lot of this fight's going to be the boxing. Curtis is going to have the what's the word, the better looking shots. He's gonna have the heavy looking shots in this fight. He's gonna be landing flush counters and the body shots. I think that's a place he needs to target in this fight. I don't think any fighter has really went to the body on Marc-André. So yeah, I'm with Harris on this with Chris Curtis. Being the better striker, I think this is gonna be on the feet. And Mark, I don't think he's gonna break down Curtis. I don't think Curtis is cardio. I don't think his cardio is gonna fade. So I like Chris Curtis here to kind of keep the distance in and out with that boxing, getting the win here.
Fight number 3 of our main card, Neil Magny versus Mike Malott. A welterweight fight here. Neil Magny, unanimous decision loss to Ian Gary back in August. Mike Malott beat Adam Fugit back in June. Now, this fight definitely a good litmus test to determine what level of fighter is Mike Malott, right? Sizable step up in competition for him for sure. Neither of these guys are dominant strikers. Magny, of course, will have a significant reach advantage in this fight. He is typically that taller, longer fighter against his opponents. But I don't really anticipate him doing much with it, right? Magny doesn't really have the highest pace striking. He's not really a dominant striker, like I mentioned. So I don't see him doing too much with it. Now, on top of that, Malott is going to be the fighter more likely to push the pace between these two, to try to be that bigger striker, to try to be that more dangerous striker. I mean, and again, sort of be the aggressor. Now, both fighters can land takedowns. Neither fighter has great takedown defense, so I do think it's something that they both can take advantage of. But I do believe that Mike Malott has the advantage on the ground. I think his grappling is better. I think, the ground game is a bit more of an intentional part of his strategy as well compared to Neil Magny. So I do see Mike Malott getting the better of those exchanges. And I mean, we always got to factor in, yes, Neil Magny absolutely has that experience advantage, but even though just 36, Magny definitely passes prime. At this point, he's kind of playing that gatekeeper role, and it's really going to be about whether or not Mike Malott passes that test. I do see Mike Malott passing the test. I do see him, again, being the fighter coming forward, using the takedowns, using the grappling, winning the rounds. Can't be overly confident because, again, this is a good litmus test to see what level is Mike Malott, but I do think that he has the tools to get it done, and my prediction is going to be Mike Malott for this fight as a result.
Yeah, this is for me a no-brainer. Neil Magny's done, right? And like he's done. This is his 40th fight. He looked terrible in his last fight, horrible. And in this fight, doesn't get better. Mike Malott, I believe, is a legit fighter. This guy is good everywhere. And in this fight, he's going to be better than Magny ultimately everywhere. Better striker, better wrestler, better grappler. He is the better grappler. And I believe he's a grappling coach at Team Alpha Male. And well, not only that, this guy's younger, and the UFC knows we don't have much. We're in Canada. We don't have many great fighters in Canada, but Mike Malott is one of the best we got, and I don't see him losing this fight. So I'm gonna have to go with Mike Malott in this spot here. I'm really confident he gets it done. Neil Magny, I think he's shot. I think he's done, and I think Neil Malott has shown that his striking is legit. Striking good strikers, Adam Fugit, Yohan Lainesse. But on the ground, I think the grappling is big. He's built to dictate the grappling. So I'm gonna go I'm gonna go with Mike Malott here in this spot here to get the win.
Moving on to our co-main event of the night, we're looking at Raquel Pennington versus Mayra Bueno Silva. Now, this is for the women's bantamweight vacant title that's currently on the line. So Raquel Pennington, 5-fight winning streak, beating Ketlen Vieira via split decision in January. Now, for what it's worth, most media scores had Ketlen Vieira winning that fight. Mayra Bueno Silva had that submission victory over Holly Holm back in July. That would have put her at 4 wins in a row. That fight, however, was overturned with a positive drug test for Mayra Bueno Silva. So, really interesting fight coming into this one. Both fighters, do they deserve it? We don't know, but the division is thin, so we got to find a champion. I'll keep the prediction part of it short. I'm pretty much all the way Mayra Bueno Silva for this fight. I think she wins it. I think she becomes the new women's bantamweight champ. I think she's more dangerous in this fight. I think she has more ways to win the fight. When I look at their striking, Pennington for sure has, the solid boxing, the ability to control the center. But Mayra Bueno Silva, she has that Muay Thai that I believe that's going to allow her to be more dynamic in this fight with her striking, with her movement as well. And I'm also looking at Mayra Bueno Silva as that fighter that puts better pressure on her opponents. Neither fighter actively lands takedowns, so don't expect much of this fight to really go to the ground. But if there is any kind of clinching or grappling or takedowns involved, I would say that Mayra Bueno Silva has the ground advantage. She's better at finding those submission opportunities. She can be more dangerous in those spots. I do think it'll be a competitive fight, of course, right? Potentially a close fight as well. High level fight for the division. I mean, it is for the title. It can go either way simply based on the stakes that are on the line. I can see Raquel Pennington's boxing prevailing in this fight as an example. But like I mentioned, I am going to have to go with Mayra Bueno Silva. More dangerous, more aggressive, more ways to win the fight. A Bueno Silva submission, round one, round two, absolutely would not surprise me in this fight. So I'm going Mayra Bueno Silva to get it done. I think she becomes the new women's bantamweight champion.
Yeah, so we got a 5-round fight here, and we got one fighter in Silva who's in her prime, and Pennington who is, I think she was pregnant before, and I'm not sure, but I think, and regardless, she's out of her prime. She's on her way out. She's on her way down, and Silva's on her way up. And I just feel like Silva, I think she can have a lot more activity in the striking. But at some point, Silva, she's a lot more dangerous. She looks for finishes, whether it be striking, whether it be with the knees, with the high kick, submission. I could see a submission in this fight. So I got to go with the girl I think is going to be the more dangerous one, that she has 25 minutes to end the fight. If she can get the neck, and I can see Silva kind of taking advantage of a situation like that. So I'm going to go Silva, becoming the champion. She's been talking a lot. I think she's going to back it up to win this fight.
All right, main event of the evening. Let's talk Sean Strickland versus Dricus Du Plessis. Middleweight fight here, middleweight championship on the line as well. Sean Strickland, of course, had that unanimous decision win over Israel Adesanya back in September. And Dricus Du Plessis, very impressive win over Robert Whitaker. That was back in July, and he is on an 8-fight winning streak at this point. Definitely an interesting main event, of course, with all the buildup that has led to it so far. But I mean, let's stick to breaking it down. Let's stick to the actual analytics of it. I think a key stat in this fight is going to be Sean Strickland's 84% takedown defense. Now, both of these guys are strikers for the most part. But Du Plessis, you look at the numbers there, lands nearly 3 takedowns per fight, right? 8 takedowns landed in his last 3 UFC fights, as an example. To be successful in this fight, I do believe that Du Plessis is going to have to implement some kind of takedown approach and look for those moments of top control against Sean Strickland. But Sean Strickland, he has a good ground game for one, but more importantly, he has, great takedown defense. So I think we are looking at a fight where the striking is really the only thing that will matter because I do think that this fight stays on the feet. Now the striking battle is very interesting, right? Du Plessis, he has that pace, he has that power to be impactful against anyone. I mean, again, we saw it especially in that Robert Whitaker fight. But Sean Strickland he's different, right? He has that chin, he has that toughness, he has that cardio, he has that pace that he puts on you, right? I think Strickland is, better equipped to win those striking exchanges throughout the fight because I think he's more balanced, more poised, more consistent, more in your face. So I can see Sean Strickland winning the rounds. I can see him, stuffing any takedown attempts. I can see him again consistently implementing that forward pressure, consistently implementing that pace and that offense. If Du Plessis wins, the way I see it, it's got to be an Alex Pereira type of power punch where it just changes the course of the fight and whether it ends Sean Strickland or not, again, it just does enough to just completely change the course of the fight. But otherwise, I think this is a fight where Sean Strickland wins the rounds. I think Sean Strickland gets the better of the striking exchanges as a cleaner striker. I think Sean Strickland, stuffs any of Dricus Du Plessis' takedown attempts if the fight gets sticky on the feet for Dricus Du Plessis. So I'm going to predict Sean Strickland gets it done here. I'm going to predict that he retains his middleweight title here. This is one of those fights where, to me, Sean Strickland wins this fight at least 7 times out of 10, in my books. So I'm going Sean Strickland to get it done. I think he retains his title.
Yeah, this is a tough one, man, because I was leading Strickland, but I'm ultimately going with Dricus Du Plessis in this fight. I think the physical advantages are going to be a factor as well. Du Plessis is a big guy, a strong guy, and he has a really high level grappling game. Everyone talks about Strickland's grappling, but I haven't seen it, man. I haven't seen it. And as much as like a lot of these guys say when they train with Strickland, he has grappling, he has this great. I haven't seen it. And when he fought Pereira, he didn't utilize none of that, and he got knocked out. So again, he probably is a great grappler, but I haven't seen anything to tell me that he's that great. Dricus is a great grappler, and I think in this fight, if his cardio is right, he fixed his breathing problem, is what they said. And if that makes him have better cardio, I think he's going to give Strickland problems with his unorthodox style. This guy's going to mix in kicks, punches. One thing, he's really reactive in regards to the counter punches. I wouldn't be surprised he hurt Strickland, knocks him out. Strickland has been knocked out, obviously. I think Du Plessis has that power, and I'm going to go with the underdog again. On paper, I think Strickland should get it done, but Du Plessis is that wild card, and he does have advantages, and he does have a couple paths in this fight here to win. So I'm going to go with the underdog here to get this done.
Let's take it to Vegas at that point. Then let's take a look at these fights and let's consider which underdog we want to take a look at, or which underdog which we think has the best shot at winning their respective fight, as well as some favorites, parlay action, that kind of thing. I'll start off by reading the underdogs, of course. Garrett Armfield is an underdog against Brad Katona. Polyana Viana is an underdog against Gillian Robertson. Priscila Cachoeira is an underdog. Jimmy Flick, Ramon Taveras, Sam Patterson, Arnold Allen, Sean Woodson, Marc-André Barriault, Neil Magny, Raquel Pennington, and Dricus Du Plessis, who is a slight underdog, although in some books it looks like it's a pick 'em at this point.
Okay, I'm gonna go with I'm gonna go with two. I'm gonna go with Taveras and Dricus Du Plessis.
All right, so Ramon Taveras at 2.4, Dricus Du Plessis, who again we're seeing at a pick 'em in some books, but nonetheless, both of those guys in that underdog spot have a few options there. In terms of my underdog pick, I do think the underdog with the best shot at winning their respective fight would be Garrett Armfield. Again, I think he just may have the better talent set compared to Brad Katona, even though Brad Katona will have the home crowd advantage as well as the cardio advantage. Let's take a look at some favorites or some parlay picks. Who are you taking a look at putting on a ticket?
All right, I'm looking at Mike Malott. I'm looking at Gillian Robertson and Jasmine Jasudavicius.
All right, those three fights, Gillian Robertson, Jasmine Jasudavicius, and Mike Malott, three Canadians. Those three would be a 2.34. That means $100 will return a total of 234 for our bigger bettors. $250 would return a total of 585. For my predictions, we do have one fight in common. That fight in common is Jasmine Jasudavicius. Otherwise, who I'm taking a look at, I'm looking at Charles Jourdain to get it done against Sean Woodson. I actually really like the value there. And I'm also looking at Chris Curtis as a good value pick, again, despite some frustration with betting on him in the past. But a couple of good value spots there. Those three fights, Jasmine Jasudavicius, Charles Jourdain, Chris Curtis, that's going to be a 3.02, meaning that $100 will return a total of 302. For our bigger bettors, $250 will return a total of 750. So let's end off on that note. This has been UFC 297, Sean Strickland versus Dricus Du Plessis full card prediction video presented by yours truly here at Boxing MMA Picks. Again, please, before you go, make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel here at Boxing MMA Picks. And most importantly, we want to hear from you in the comments. Let us know how you feel about our picks. Let us know how you feel about our underdogs, our favorites, the way that we feel about the main event, opposing sides there. Any props that you're potentially looking at, any bets that you want an additional breakdown on, let that all be known in the comments, and we're more than happy to have that conversation with you. But officially signing off, he goes by Zan, I go by Harris. We are Boxing MMA Picks, giving you our prediction for UFC 297, Sean Strickland versus Dricus Du Plessis. In our usual fashion, let's get this money.
Let's get it.